Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
I'm just gonna.
All right, here it is. All right.
Sorry. Didn't tell me.
I had no idea it was on. What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to live breaking coverage here of the Chad Daybell case, straight from CrimeCon 2024. We're in Nashville, and stand by here, and I'm going to be right back. I'm going to mute myself here, and I'm going to try to see if we can get a couple of people on to discuss with us. How is everybody? Miss all you guys, and looks like we're about to get a verdict here. And I would have to agree with Amy and Leo and others that this is going to be guilty on all counts. Stand by one moment.
Let's listen to
All right, all. This is about to be the moment of truth for Chad Daybell, looking about as excited as he usually is. Looks like Humpty Dumpty sitting behind the defense counsel table there with John Pryor, and obviously very tense and anxious moments here for everyone. I just spoke with Megan Connor, cousin of Lori Vallow. Obviously, they are incredibly tense. Everyone is rising. I am not hearing audio, but Space Coast, I know you know we're not hearing this right now. Other channels appear to have the
ACR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The court's been advised that the jury has reached a verdict. The court will note the parties are present. The state's present with Mr. Wood, Ms. Blake, Mr. Wixom, and Ms. Beatty. Mr. Pryor's here representing the defendant, Mr. Daybell. And the court at this time is going to instruct the jurors to please be brought into the courtroom. That will include our alternate jurors as well to be seated. And then I will have the marshal get the verdict form from the jury once they return to the courtroom. So if they can come in at this time, we'll have them brought in.
So there you hear Judge Stephen Boyce obviously presiding over this case. They're about to bring in the jury. That audio issue is not Space Coast. Never thought it would be. I mean, it is. He said, sorry, y'all had his computer muted.
All right, please.
Here comes the jury. Chad is standing, no jacket. Interesting. Hasn't had one. He looked quite stoic as usual. I'm going to kick back. This is a very big moment, and we're just going to listen together all the way through. We literally just got to CrimeCon, chaotic on our end as per usual, and we're going to see if we can get some people to join us. Big moment.
Here's our President Counter for you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, the court's going to next just make a reference that there is a courtroom conduct order in effect in this proceeding to remain in effect. So I appreciate everyone complying with that order, as most of you have done throughout the proceedings in this case. At this time, then, the first matter I'd like to take up is to do a roll call of the jury for the record. So, Madam Clerk, if you could please conduct a roll call of our jury to make sure they're all present and properly seated at this time.
Juror number 1, red card number 27. Juror number 2, red card number 219. Juror number 4, red card number 631. Juror number 5, red card number 653. Juror number 7, red card number 752. Juror number 8, red card 1680. Juror number 9, red card number 823. Juror number 10, red card 1358.
Present.
Juror number 11, red card 1365. Juror number 12, red card 716. Juror number 14, red card 997.
Present.
And juror number 15, red card 1078.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for conducting the roll call. All right, at this time, I'm next going to inquire from the jury foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? All right, thank you. Mr. Bailiff, if you would please retrieve the verdict from the jury foreperson. Thank you. All right, the court has reviewed the verdict form. I'll note that all counts have been properly marked, as well as the verdict form's been properly dated and signed by the foreperson. The next step then is Mr. Daybell, if you and counsel would please rise. I'm going to have the clerk read the verdict.
In the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho in and for the County of Fremont. State of Idaho plaintiff versus Chad Guy Daybell defendant. Case number CR 22211623. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tamara Tammy Daybell? Guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 6 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tamara Tammy Daybell? Guilty. Question number 7. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of insurance fraud? Guilty. Question number 8. In regards to count 8 of the amended indictment, in regards to count 9 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of insurance fraud? Guilty. Dated this 30th day of May, 2024, and signed by the presiding juror.
All right, Madam Clerk, thank you for reading the verdict. At this time, I'm just going to collectively ask the jurors, all of you, is this in fact your unanimous verdict on each of those counts? Very well. At this time, I'm going to inquire if the parties wish to have the jury polled. Does the state wish to have the jury polled?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Does the defense, Mr. Pryor, wish to have the jury polled?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well, then. I'm going to direct the clerk to record the verdict. At this time, then, this does conclude the guilt phase of this trial. Because the defendant has been convicted on counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, the state has filed a notice of intent to seek the death penalty, and so a second phase of this trial, called the sentencing phase, will be taking place next. We're going to take a recess at this time for approximately an hour. We will come back on the record and begin with the start of that sentencing phase of the trial. I would like to remind everyone that this courtroom conduct order is still in application throughout these proceedings. Thank you all for complying with that. We are going to take that recess at this time. Mr. Daybell is to remain in custody at this time for the commencement of the sentencing phase. And with that, thank you all, and we will be in recess.
All right, please.
Powerful moment, as powerful as it gets there. Convicted on 9 counts. You see it on the screen. Guilty on all counts across the board. And what is eerie and poignant about this is that in 1 hour's time, Judge Stephen Boyce informed everyone in the courtroom that the death penalty phase of this trial will begin. It will now turn into a death penalty case at this point. There are really 2 trials in one. We are joined right now by Sky Lazaro, perhaps best known to our viewers as the former attorney for Corey Richins, and she's joining us now from her car. I appreciate it. Sky, any surprise here on your end?
After watching this trial and the trial of Lori, not really. I think if the jurors were going to convict him of one, they were going to convict him of everything.
And that's exactly what they did. I didn't realize there was 9 separate counts. Can you just kind of explain this in layman's terms? I mean, I know obviously he is charged in the murder and the conspiracy to commit murder for Tammy Daybell, for JJ Vallow, and Ty Lee. And let me say, by the way, I just tweeted out to Kay and Larry Woodcock. I'm really thinking of them today. The real victims are the family here, is the family. I spoke to Megan Connor just a few moments ago, and she was hopping on another podcast. She said she'd be willing to come on tonight. Obviously, we're all at CrimeCon. One of the people that's been following this very closely is Gigi McKelvey of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I know she's on the road, which is a crazy time. But again, guilty on 9 counts. Sky, can you just break this down for us? This is guilty on the conspiracy and the murder charges and the insurance charge here.
Really, the one that matters is the murder charge, because that's the one, that and the conspiracy to commit murder is the one that allows them to seek the death penalty. So, the insurance fraud charges are going to be somewhat meaningless, depending on whether or not the jury unanimously decides to, sentence him to death or life without parole. Essentially, the insurance they can tack it on as consecutive, but with life without parole, in the best case, it's really irrelevant.
And look at this, Diane King. This does not surprise me that Gigi, who I was just texting with about meeting up here at CrimeCon, she pulled over. I'm glad she wasn't driving while watching verdicts. Never a healthy thing to do. So Sky, walk us through this now. This is one trial, but now there's sort of a second phase, the death penalty phase. I didn't realize Judge Boyce would resume court in literally 1 hour from now to start that phase of the trial. What happens now?
I was surprised by that too. In my experience, that's usually set out, because really what happens, the death penalty part or the sentencing part is different than the guilt part. Really, the focus on the death penalty part from a defense perspective is you're focusing on mitigation, just really trying to convince the jury that even though they convicted him of murder, life without parole is the right, is the right conclusion. So they're very different as far as the types of evidence that you're going to present and what you're trying to get across about your client.
And I mean, what's your gut tell you viscerally? Is he going to be convicted, and will his punishment be death now, or will it be life in prison?
I think that's hard. Out here, Utah, Idaho, the state doesn't seek the death penalty very often. And so I think if there probably ever was a case where a jury could reach a verdict of death, this might be the one, just given how sad and tragic it was as it relates to these children and Tammy.
Knightwood is asking the question that I'm sure his defense attorney is already pondering, which is how long before an appeal? We do know if he's convicted of the death penalty, they will be appealing this for upwards of 20 years. That's usually how it goes. But how long before an appeal either way here, do you think?
A notice of appeal usually needs to be filed within 30 days of being sentenced.
Within 30 days of sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me ask you, I know obviously we're all busy people, and I'm sure you weren't watching every moment of this, but how do you compare this trial to Lori's trial? Did you think that this was a more surefire case on equal grounding, or, that it was less likely that he would be found guilty in this case as compared with Lori Vallow?
Yeah, I think Lori didn't help herself in her trial. I think Chad was a little more involved in his defense, and really had some things to argue as far as, the defense's theory was, it was Lori who kind of, coerced him into doing this, and he wasn't there. And, there was a lack of forensic evidence and things along those lines. So I think this case probably had more on the defense side to argue. Although, following both of them, I'm not surprised by the verdict.
And deliberations, they only began deliberating yesterday afternoon. Does it surprise you in any way that today is Thursday? It's 3 something here in Nashville. I guess it's about 1 something in Idaho, roughly speaking. It looks like Ann Bremner has joined, who's a very, very well-known criminal defense attorney as well. Ann, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Thank you for
Great.
hopping on. You're joined by Sky Lazaro, another prominent female criminal defense attorney. Sky, are you surprised that deliberations began yesterday afternoon and already there's a verdict in this case, or do you think this jury had made up their mind a long time ago?
I think the fact that they came back this quickly means that this jury had made its mind up and probably just wanted to make sure everybody, was on board and they went through things. When you have a trial that lasts this long and 9 counts, that's a lot of information to go through. If a jury has any real questions, I think, about what their verdict is going to be.
When you think about this, Ann Bremner, welcome. When you think about this, the so-called doomsday couple and this cult belief that their kids were just demons, or I should say, Lori's kids were demons who had to be exorcised out of them. What's your overall take on what we just witnessed here with a guilty verdict for Chad Daybell? Are you surprised at all?
Not at all. The only thing I thought maybe there could be some deviation on straight across guilty verdicts would be on Tammy Daybell, just because of the expert testimony, with respect to her cause of death. I mean, they did put on a defense with respect to whether or not, she died from asphyxia or strangulation. And so, I think a jury would have a hard time. I would have thought they would have had a little bit of a hard time convicting him of killing the mother of his children, but they didn't. I mean, this is a really strong case against him. And I always say, those children were buried in his backyard. Enough said.
100%. JJ and Tylee, we should all be thinking about them. And I've spoken to some of the family members, and I was tweeting with Larry and Kay Woodcock. So my thoughts particularly go out to them. I've gotten to know them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely horrific. Monique Dawn has a comment here. He's 50 now. By the way, he looks 83 to me, but he's 50 now. So even 20 years is a long time. It just reminds me of a running joke with my own mother. I tell her I don't want to die young. She says it's impossible because I'm 54. So either way,
right.
So, we just heard from Sky, and this is really a trial within a trial with the death penalty phase. Are you surprised, Judge Boyce? And I don't know if you even know this. He already instructed the court that they will begin those proceedings in 1 hour. They're starting that right away. Is that typical or atypical? And
oh, is that for me? Sorry, I didn't hear my name in there.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that happening here in Washington State when we're right next to Idaho, but I mean, generally going to have to do it right away anyway. And of course, the jury has to make that decision. It can never be a judge on a sentence because it's fact-based. And only jurors are the finders of fact. So, I think that's called swift justice. I mean, they're going to, go right into the penalty phase and put this case to bed. And I think most people know, most of your listeners know, this is a firing squad state potentially in Idaho. And probably one of the last places you want to kill somebody would be Idaho, given what would be faced by a defendant in a capital case. And just facing a murder trial in Idaho.
Yeah. Sky, are you still with us? I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I am. I just got to the airport, so I'm going to have to jump off in a minute, but I'm here for a second.
I'll have a final question for you. Judge Boyce, initially, when the Lori Vallow case started, he was taking some heat, but it seems like he did a very good job presiding over both these cases. Just wanted to get your take. I know you're never going to badmouth the judge in your own state, but what do you think of the job he did?
I think, these are hard cases for judges to manage when cases get so much press. And there's a lot of really strong opinions on him. I think overall he did a pretty good job of keeping the issues narrowed and focused to what needed to be presented and litigated and what didn't.
Okay. Well, Sky, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. I hope you come back on soon and enjoy wherever you're headed to.
Thank you. Always happy to be on.
All right. Thanks,
Take
Sky.
care. Bye.
And if you can, and if you have a couple more minutes, can you just walk us through now this death penalty phase? So they're literally going to start this in less than an hour. What are the first steps in this process?
Well, I mean, you're basically going to have like a mini trial. I mean, but it's only dealing with what the punishment should be. So you'll have the, of course, remarks from counsel, and then you're going to have the state will put on, they'll put on victim impact testimony. Essentially, they're going to have, people come in and talk about what kind of impact this has had, these homicides, and then there could be expert testimony. But I don't know that he ever raised anything dealing with his own mental state. I don't think he ever did. So, but maybe they'll raise something now, because then we go to the defense, and the defense has got to put on, evidence of mitigating factors, mitigation. And some of those things, could well be dealing with like a mental state or mental issue that he may have, or physical issue, etc. And be interesting to see also, are we going to hear from his kids? They've been supportive, as I understand it so far, to a certain extent. So, there may be family testimony, but you got to pull out all the stops as the defense in a death case right now. I can remember going to the Scott Peterson trial a long time ago, and of course they found him guilty, and then they had the penalty phase that was delayed some at the request of the defense attorney, Mark Garagos. But I remember he stood up and said, "I didn't expect that you'd find him guilty. So I don't really know what, to go forward with." And I thought, yeah, it's really interesting, He so much believed in his client's innocence. And of course, Scott Peterson got the death penalty. And of course, that's all been overturned. And now the Innocence Project is looking at his case. So that's kind of an overview. And, my ex-husband was a death penalty lawyer, and he had Ted Bundy as a client. He had a lot of cases. So I know what he went through in those cases, and they're tremendously difficult for the defense.
And by the way, that is the Ann Bremner pedigree there, high-powered attorneys, although albeit not married to him anymore, but still a powerhouse attorney couple there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a couple of quick questions for you, and then I'll let you go because I know you're driving. But 8 weeks, dozens and dozens of witnesses. The deliberations began yesterday afternoon, lasted into this morning. What does that tell you? Did the jury have their mind made up from pretty much the get-go here, or at least somewhere in the middle of this trial to come back this quickly?
I mean, there's a study out there. It's not science-based, but it says 80% of jurors make up their minds in opening statements and never change their minds. I ascribe to that. I think that's what happened. I think they heard enough, and then they filtered the evidence, through their opinion in memory of the opening statement. So when they got in the jury room, when they took their first poll, it may have been unanimous.
One of the things that's interesting to me about Chad Daybell is just his stoicism. This guy, I have never seen anything emotion-wise or emotive coming from this guy, and it was no different at sentencing. I mean, just no reaction from anything ever. What do you make of that? I mean, is this a personality flaw, or I don't even know if you'd call it a flaw? Is this just him?
Sociopath, psychopath, I never remember the difference.
Yeah.
But somewhere in those, descriptions, he seemed to have always been like that.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, he was the quote unquote leader of this, doomsday couple, which had some small following, but I just don't understand that portion of it. I know that's much more up a therapist or a psychologist alley, but how anyone would follow this guy, where the attraction to him would be in that regard, I have no idea. But you mentioned his kids. This is literally now a life or death matter. His kids have been supporting him. I think his kids are going to show up in court, and they're going to make the equivalent. I don't know if you call it a victim impact statement here in this portion. I don't know what the legal terminology is, but I do believe they're going to come out and say, please don't kill my father. How much weight does that carry with the court?
Well, it's huge with the jury. My ex-husband had a case where 13 people were murdered and by his client, allegedly. But in the death penalty phase, he brought in the mother of the defendant, who was from China, very small woman, and she bowed to the jury and said, please don't kill my son. And they didn't.
Jimmy McNutty, friend of the show, interesting comment here. He says that Chad wants death to get his martyrdom.
Oh,
So, I mean, maybe there's, do you agree with that?
yes, I think that's an excellent point. Excellent point. He's a true believer, apparently. I mean, he wrote all these books and, he preached this, line of thinking. And then I guess he's saying that he's like dying for what he believed in. He's a martyr.
Miss Cece here says psychopaths show no emotion. And then Arcto says the children have no footing after lying on the stand, but we'll see. That's going to be up to the jurors. Another quick 2 questions for you, and then I promise to let you go.
Okay.
John Pryor, he was the sole defense counsel. At the beginning of this, everyone was saying, how's this guy going to go 8 to 10 weeks? He did it, but will there now be a case for ineffective assistance of counsel? Because basically there was literally one attorney for a death penalty case. Are they going to go back and use that in their favor now?
Yeah, they could. Ineffective assistance is a big one on appeal of these death penalty cases. However, from what I saw in the trial, I thought he did an excellent job. So I don't know what could be pointed to say that he, was ineffective in his presentation to the jury or his preparation, etc. But sure, it could be. I mean, it's a very, very big case.
Just want to thank Ann Bremner, who is a very, very seasoned criminal defense attorney. Ann, thank you so much for hopping on with us and kind of filling in the blank.
Thanks for having me.
I wish you were coming to CrimeCon, Ann, but we'll see you next time, I guess.
I know, they didn't ask me this year. I did it for 3 years, but
I'm gonna yell at management, Ann, on your behalf.
I appreciate it.
I will represent you.
Okay.
And follow the Karen Reed trial and come on and discuss it with us. It's a big one.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day, Ann.
You too. Thanks.
Annie K, isn't the death penalty the same as life without parole? The same for someone his age? Annie, it's a great question, and I'm no attorney, so I have to go on the record as saying that. But in essence, yes. But there's also cases, I think, where appeals could run out more quickly. There's a high-profile nature to this case, and today, 70 is not that old. A prison 70 is much older, and I think that look at this, Abby saying I'm going to Karen for Ann. Yeah. SGS trials is the best. Thank you, Miranda Lee. The bottom line is Chad Daybell could live to 103. We don't know. So it's a matter of the legal process, and they're going to see it through. And as you heard, literally in much less than an hour now, probably about 40 minutes from now, if not less, they're going to start the death penalty phase of this trial. How long will that last? I think it's going to last at least a bunch of days, if not a week or more. So there's going to be some heft to it, and we're going to have to just sit by, stand by and see. But if there's ever a case to put someone to death, the murder of 2 young children, his former wife, this would be the case. And I would not want to be put to death in Idaho. We all know that Brian Koberger is facing a potential death penalty as well in the same state. And they've just legalized a firing squad, which is not a way personally that I would want to leave this world. From Erica, thank you, Joel, COE, for jumping on. Thanks to all your moderators. Thank you, Erica. Thank you for being here. Allie B from Tennessee, who I am much closer to at this moment since I'm in Nashville for CrimeCon, gifting 1 surviving the Survivor membership. Could Chad speak and plead for his life? I think the answer to that is yes. I think he will have a chance to make some sort of statement in defense of his own life. When you look at this guy, it sounds like it's going to go something like this. Judge Boyce, please don't kill me. And jurors. So I think it's going to be I don't know what kind of influence Chad's going to have on these jurors and the judge. I really don't know. But what is interesting, this is not decided by the judge. It will be decided by a jury of his peers. So if you're just joining us now, we just got the verdict probably 25 minutes ago in the Chad Daybell trial. Guilty on all 8 counts. There was a question over 8 or 9 counts. I believe it is 8 counts. 3 of murder for Tammy, JJ, and Ty Lee, and then conspiracy to commit murder for each of those. So that's 6. And then he was found guilty on 2 of the insurance fraud charges, and that brings us to 8. So we are talking 8 guilty charges across the board. Chad Daybell found guilty on all counts. He will at the very least spend the rest of his life behind bars. And at the very worst for him, he will fall to either the firing squad or another method of death by the state. And the COE, we're in a room. She's running around barefoot, telling me we might have Anjanette Levy joining us in a moment to get reaction. She, of course, is the law and crime anchor and has been following the case very closely. When are victim impact statements heard? Catherine, how are you in Maui? The short answer is I think they're going to go through a little mini trial here with both the state and John Pryor as the defense, making arguments regarding the death penalty phase. And then after that, toward the very end, just like in a normal trial, I think we will get the victim impact statements being read aloud in the courtroom. So that should be at the end of this part the end of this next phase of the trial. And incredibly, it's starting very soon. Let me see if Anjanette is here. Anjanette.
Hey, Joel.
Hey, Anjanette. Are you coming to CrimeCon, Anjanette?
Hey, guess where I am? I'm on the highway now, talking to you on my phone. Can you believe it?
Well, I'm excited to see you then.
Yes.
What's your reaction? Chad Daybell guilty on all counts. Any surprise to you?
Not surprised one bit. Not at all. I think that this was, I hate to say something is a foregone conclusion. I hate to say that about any case, but I think that, I think this was the verdict that we all expected.
Yeah.
The evidence was there. You know, we saw what happened in Lori Vallow's trial. She was convicted. She didn't fight it. You know, she essentially didn't put up a defense. So no one should be surprised by Chad Daybell being found guilty of these crimes. I mean, the bodies of children, the remains of children were found in his yard. And there was so much, there was other evidence, consciousness of guilt type of evidence. You know, you have him saying, you know, he's not coming back, things like that. I mean, there was so much. There was circumstantial evidence. There was physical evidence. This is not a surprise. Nobody should be shocked by this. I feel badly for his children. I know that they have supported him, and you know, both of their parents are gone now.
Which case do you think was more of a quote unquote slam dunk? Lori's case or this case, in your opinion?
You know, probably, you know, a lot of people would say Lori's maybe wasn't, but I don't know. I think it's a close call, but Lori's for sure. She was responsible for those children. They were her children. They were in her care and custody. And you are responsible for your children. And
Wow.
if your children are missing, guess what? It's on you. And you should not be in Hawaii reading books by the pool with your paramour or your new husband, in this case, hanging out while people are searching for your children. You know, obviously, I think that Lori Vallow is a very flawed human being and very, you know, I in some ways, I think she actually believes all of this stuff about light and dark and all this nonsense. But
by the way, Anjanette, when it rains, it pours. Verdict. They just announced a verdict is about to be read in former President Donald Trump's
Oh.
case. That's going to happen soon. We're not going to be covering that because I am staying far, far from politics from my old days at Fox News. But for those
But how do you not? How do you not cover that? My goodness.
I
You
will
don't even
be,
have to you don't have to get political about it, you
no,
know,
you're
but
right.
it is a, I mean, it's unfortunate. It is political, you know, it has become political. So,
yeah, that's definitely a whole other bag, but I'll be watching it for sure. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in, and look at this. Tara Malik is here. I'm going to bring her in. It's a party now. We've got Anjanette on the phone. Tara Malik, how are you? Thank you for joining.
Well. Yeah.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Good. How are you?
Good.
Tara, are you in the least bit surprised by this, Tara, by this verdict? Guilty on all counts.
No, not at all. I think the case against Chad was a lot stronger than the case against Lori. I would have been surprised if he was found not guilty. So this is the right outcome based on the evidence that was disclosed in open court.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I'm curious why do you think this was a much stronger case against him than it was against Lori?
I think a couple of things. I mean, if you recall with Lori's case, one of the most critical pieces of evidence was the hair that was found underneath the duct tape that surrounded her son's body. And with Chad, there was just so much more, including the phone call that he made as his property was being searched. I think there were a number of indicators that Chad really did know exactly what was happening. He seemed to be positioned as kind of the leader of this bizarre indoctrination and cult-like, group, this idea of the zombies and people being possessed. I think for all of those reasons, there was a stronger case against him. I mean, the physical evidence, yes, but also just the theme that was set up really that started in Lori's case.
By the way, let me just tell you what's amazing in 2024. I am in Nashville in a hotel room at CrimeCon, and we are broadcasting to the world from a laptop about the Chad Daybell verdict in Boise, Idaho. It's really amazing, and this is why the mainstream media, a former member of it, is telling you it's dead. Mainstream media is dead. It's all about this now. Non-traditional media, podcasting. Anjanette on the cutting edge of that at Law and Crime. And I'm going to be talking in the coming weeks to Anjanette about some other things. But Anjanette, how far away are you from CrimeCon? Oh, we lost her. Tara Malik.
I'm here.
Oh, Anjanette, how far are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You can't hear us. You're cutting in and out. I think you're in a bad area. I'm going to bounce. COE, I just bounced her out. When she's a little clearer, you can bring her back in. I love having that power. I can just bounce people out. Tara Malik. By the way, Jimmy McNutty, who's a new friend and a friend of the show, said that he didn't watch this trial because he watched the Lori Vallow trial. I think that's interesting, and I think he's serious. But Tara, Judge Boyce, literally in about a half hour or less, is going to start the death penalty phase of this. Are you surprised that it's starting right away?
I'm a little bit surprised that it's starting right away. But, this case has been pending for some time, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's, all the attorneys at this point in time have exchanged all the information that they were going to exchange to go into this phase 2 death penalty phase. So I think everyone is ready and raring to go.
Yeah. By the way, someone asked, well, why can't we see what's in court? You're actually looking at the court feed right now. It is in recess. They're taking a little break before. Look at Abby Crossing telling me, be careful, Joel, because I was able to throw Anjanette out. Power got to Chad's head. I'll be sure not to take my StreamYard power too seriously. And Anjanette has just bounced back out. The mods on this channel are amazing, Karen Bagwell. You're right about that. Tara, was there anything about this case that did surprise you? Is there anything that stood out to you, or was it just pretty much what we saw is what was expected?
I wasn't surprised by a whole lot about this case. I think, had Lori's case not gone first, there would be a couple more surprises about it. There were certainly some questions about how the defense was presented in this case, and I think we've talked about that on this show before. But no huge surprises. Quick jury verdict, which I think is a good thing here.
Tara Malik, by the way, we're all over this. If you probably haven't been following it closely, but I want you to, is the Karen Reed trial out of Canton, Massachusetts, and we'll get you in on it because we're going to be staying on that case. It's an amazing case where people think that there was a cover up by police officers involved in the death of another police officer, and the murders being pinned on his ex-girlfriend, and it's becoming more and more dramatic. So I'd love to get you in because I know you're excellent at analysis here. But what with Chad here, people have asked, what is even the point of the death penalty? Because he's 50, and by the time he sits in prison with all the appeals, but this is a legal record, correct? I mean, and this could also, because of the high profile nature, there's a chance they could speed this up a little bit and he could be put to death sooner than later. Is that not right?
Well, yes. Is that likely? Probably not, for a number of reasons. He's been found guilty. If they come back and indeed find that he should be given the death penalty as a sentence, you are talking about years of appeals, that are going to wind their way through the court process. There's been an argument made before that the cost of doing that, the time cost and the actual cost, is really not worth having death penalty. It's a bigger philosophical kind of discussion here, but if he is sentenced to death, we're not going to see it anytime soon.
And Tara, Anjanette, feel free to jump in, but I'm going to ask Tara, what about the fact, at the beginning of this case, everyone was saying, what's the deal here? John Pryor is going to try this solo, which he did, and he made it, 8 weeks. I think it was just short of 8 weeks, but is this going to be, and I asked Ann Bremner this, is this going to be a point on appeal that he only had one attorney in a death penalty case, and it was just too much for one attorney to handle?
Yeah, I think we had all kind of suspected that there may be a setup or a claim of, ineffective assistance of counsel, kind of the back and forth, and his last minute motion or request to withdraw from the case that we saw. That could certainly be an area where they go back and they raise it as an issue in one of these appeals if the death penalty actually comes to, a sentence of the death penalty comes to fruition.
By the way, the MVP today, aside from Space Coast, Steve Cohen, he also just landed in Nashville. I'm going to see him in a little while, and I might make him do 17 tequila shots. But he just landed in Nashville, and as the COE says, he's been booking guests like Tara and Anjanette and Ann, who all just came on, and Sky Lazaro. Best known, perhaps, Sky Lazaro was defending Corey Richins, the mom of 3 accused of the fentanyl poisoning of her now deceased husband, Eric Richins. Sky no longer involved in that. Tara Malik, your final thoughts here. This again, guilty. Chad Daybell guilty on all counts across the board. The death penalty phase is going to start soon. Has any of this? Anything you want to summarize here before we roll out? And then I'm going to go watch the Trump verdict right after this. There's going to be a verdict in that case. But your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think that this verdict is unsurprising. I think that it's the right call based on the evidence that was presented in court. I think that the prosecution did a nice job of both covering what they needed to cover to prove the elements of the case, but also being able to put together a very compelling argument and theme for the case that they carried from Vallo's trial and Vallo's case all the way through to Chad Daybell's. It was a theory that made sense. It obviously spoke to the jurors as well, and ultimately persuaded them to this outcome.
And a quick question, is Chad going to be able to give his own statement here? Not necessarily, it's not taking the stand, but is he going to be able to speak to the court in his own defense in this death penalty portion of the trial?
He could make a statement. Obviously that'll be between him and his attorney on whether or not he does that, and presents something in court. I wouldn't even venture to guess about whether or not he's going to go and do such a thing. But given his conduct so far, maybe not. If I was pressed to guess.
Tara Malik, look at this. We are keeping this up because court will resume. I've been saying this all along, COE, for the penalty, that death penalty phase. Ignore Joel saying he's going to I'm going to go check out what's happening. I'm a news guy. I'm curious. I want to see what's going on.
People should also stay tuned to continue to watch.
You all should stay tuned, but you can watch two things. People look, Tara Malik's looking at her phone right now. I can tell. You can look at two different screens at once. Tara Malik, you're, as my mother would say, a gentle woman and a scholar. Thank you for joining us today and giving us the insight. And please check out the Karen Reed trial. We need you. We need some best guests on that. And I'll hit you up next week for that. Thank you for being with us. Thanks, Tara.
All right. Thank you. And tell Steve hi for me as well. And thanks for having me on.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
COE pranced over here barefoot. Don't end the stream. It's staying up. I'm going to leave the stream up, everybody. It is staying up. I'm going to be here. We're at CrimeCon 2024. We're going to be coming to you live periodically on short lives. I'm planning to do Phil and Scott tomorrow, typical show. But we will show you. And if you're following me on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor, I'm posting all kinds of pictures and video of this hotel we're at CrimeCon. It is the biggest hotel I think I've ever seen. It's a resort with waterfalls, restaurants, fake alligators and rivers and things of that nature. So follow me on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor. Once again, Chad Daybell convicted on all 8 counts of murder and the deaths of JJ and Tylee Vallow and Tammy Daybell. May we think of them today and their families. Also guilty on all conspiracy to commit murder charges against those 3 people, and 2 insurance fraud charges, bringing it to 8 counts, which he is found guilty on. And appreciate you all being here. Love you, America, and we'll see you soon from CrimeCon.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, once the jurors are ready to be brought in, they can enter the courtroom, please.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, please. Here's our President Counter for you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are back on the record on case CR 2221-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. The court notes that earlier this afternoon, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on several counts that are subject to this capital sentencing phase, including in the verdict form counts 1, count 2, count 3, count 4, count 5, and count 6 of the amended indictment. The court at this time then is going to commence with the capital sentencing phase. I'll note that in this case, the jurors have returned, including the juror alternates that are here as well, and the 12 jurors who returned the verdict under Idaho Code 192515 subsection 5B, the court is using the same jury to conduct this phase of sentencing also. And that statute reads that if the defendant's guilt was determined by a jury verdict, the same jury shall hear the special sentencing proceeding. So we are in that special sentencing proceeding. As I mentioned, the jurors are here and present. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for continuing your jury service. You've again been seated for your continued service in this case. And that's the matter we're taking up at this time. To give you an idea of just the schedule, the court has some preliminary instructions that are going to be read to you this afternoon. We're going to commence then with further evidence on the sentencing phase starting tomorrow morning after I read these preliminary instructions. And the court's proposal on our typical scheduled plan would be to start at 8:30. Is the state going to be ready to proceed at 8:30 with any impact statements that may be offered?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, that's how we'll run the scheduling at this point then, and I'll inquire as to the jurors going forward. Also, the scheduling we'll have during this phase of the proceedings. They don't need to be limited to the timeframes we've had throughout the trial, including, depending on how long this takes, weekends. So I am essentially leaving up to the jurors their proposed schedule within reason of when we'll work through this proceeding. So the court is going to read some preliminary instructions then to the jurors. And again, you'll receive additional jurors when you retire to deliberate on this part of the case. But for now, the court will just read these and those will be included with you later. So in this case, the defendant in this case has been convicted now of the crimes of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. We will now have a sentencing phase of the trial regarding those offenses. Additional evidence may be presented during the sentencing phase. You should also consider the evidence presented during the trial. Before the death penalty can be considered, the state must prove at least one statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. If you unanimously decide that the state has so proven one or more statutory aggravating circumstances, then you must decide whether the imposition of the death penalty would be unjust by weighing all mitigating circumstances against each proven statutory aggravating circumstance. At a separate proceeding, the court will sentence the defendant for other offenses of which you have found the defendant guilty. Instruction number 2. Your duties are to determine the facts, to apply the law set forth in my instruction to those facts, and in this way to decide the case. In so doing, you must follow my instructions regardless of your own opinion of what the law is or should be, or what either side may state the law to be. You must consider them as a whole, not picking out one and disregarding others. The order in which the instructions are given has no significance as to their relative importance. The law requires that your decision be made solely upon the evidence before you. Faithful performance by you of these duties is vital to the administration of justice. In determining the facts, you may consider only the evidence admitted during this trial and during the sentencing phase. The production of evidence in court is governed by rules of law. At times during the sentencing phase, an objection may be made to questions asked a witness or to a witness's answer or to an exhibit. This simply means I'm being asked to decide a particular rule of law. Arguments on the admissibility of evidence are designed to aid the court and not to be considered by you nor affect your deliberations. If I sustain an objection to a question or to an exhibit, the witness may not answer the question or the exhibit may not be considered. Do not attempt to guess what the answer might have been or what the exhibit might have shown. Similarly, if I tell you not to consider a particular statement or exhibit, you should put it out of your mind and not refer to it or rely on it in your later deliberations. During the sentencing phase, I may have to talk with the parties about the rules of law, which should apply in the case. Sometimes that will occur at the bench. Other times you may be excused from the courtroom so that we can discuss those matters. You are not to speculate about any such discussions. They are necessary from time to time and help the sentencing phase run more smoothly. Some of you have probably heard the terms circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, and hearsay evidence. Do not be concerned with those terms. You are to consider all the evidence admitted during the trial and during the sentencing phase. However, the law does not require you to believe all the evidence. As the sole judges of the facts, you must determine what evidence you believe and what weight you attach to it. If any evidence is admitted for a limited purpose, you are not to consider it for any other purpose. There is no magical formula by which one may evaluate testimony. You bring with you to this courtroom all the experience and background of your lives. In your everyday affairs, you determine for yourselves whom you believe, what you believe, and how much weight you attach to what you are told. The same considerations that you use in your everyday dealings in making these decisions are the considerations which you should apply in your deliberations. In deciding what you believe, do not make your decision simply because more witnesses may have testified one way than the other. Your role is to think about the testimony of each witness you hear and decide how much you believe of what the witness had to say. A witness who has special knowledge in a particular matter may give an opinion on that matter. In determining the weight to give such opinion, you should consider the qualifications and credibility of the witnesses and the reasons given for the opinion. You are not bound by such opinion. Give it the weight, if any. Instruction number 3. It is presumed that no statutory aggravating circumstance exists in this case. This presumption remains throughout the sentencing phase and during your deliberations. The state has the burden of proving the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance, and that burden remains on the state throughout the sentencing phase. The defendant is not required to prove the absence of any aggravating circumstance, nor is the defendant required to produce any evidence at all. The state must prove the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible or imaginary doubt. It is a doubt based on reason and common sense. It may arise from a careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence or from lack of evidence. If after considering all the evidence you have a reasonable doubt about the defendant's guilt, you must find the defendant not guilty. That in this time then concludes the initial preliminary instructions for the sentencing phase. And the court is going to be in recess then until 8:30 in the morning, when we'll commence with evidence on that phase of the trial. Before we break for the day, does the state have anything further?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further from the defense?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll note that the jurors will remain sequestered during these proceedings, and we'll begin again tomorrow at 8:30. Thank you again for your continued service, and that will conclude our matter for today. Thank you.
All right.